There are no apologies that I'm aware of. Has anybody heard from Councillor Arnold? Me neither. You'll notice that our first submitter isn't due until 20 past, but it gives us a chance to go over the process for the next couple of days. From my perspective, it would be really useful if you remembered that when submitters have finished giving their presentation, that we are to ask questions, not make statements. It'll help the process go a lot quicker. Rhiannon, do you want to give us an overview of the process, please?
Thank you, Chair. Morena, councillors.
You might need to pull that microphone a little closer.
Is that better?
Thank you.
So we've got the hearings today and tomorrow. We've had 541 submitters. You should all have received an updated version of the hearing timetable, which Amelie's been working really hard to put together for you to try and minimise the number of gaps. There are a few. So we start today and run through until 2:30 when you have a brief break before extraordinary PPP and extraordinary IS, and then we start again tomorrow morning and run all day. So each submitter will have 10 minutes. There's 5 minutes for them to speak and then 5 minutes for you to ask questions. We do have to keep quite strictly to time, so to help that, Georgia and Amelie have a little buzzer which they will sound, and that will just help Councillor Lowe with the chairing of the meeting. We have the report here, and I just want to really recognise all the people that worked really hard over 3 days, a lot of late nights to get this out to you. Talini, Mara, Georgia, Amelie really worked really hard. It's a huge job. So you can see the cover report has a brief summary for you for the feedback that we had in the submissions. Then also Georgia has put together a table for you of the summary of submissions, so that's tab 1.1 on your board books agenda. So that contains each submission and a colour coding for the main issues. So green means that the submitter preferred the preferred option, orange means that they preferred the second option, or grey that they had no preference. Red was that council should do nothing. I'll just note that the numbers are not fully in order. So when we removed duplicates, etc., that's why there is more than 541 numbers within the board books. So don't worry if you see 575, etc. They are all in there. In tabling this report today, I would just ask if you would receive the late submissions. So in addition to the 4 that are named within your agenda, we've also received 5 within the last couple of days, which you've got copies of. So that's from Wendy Baker, Bronwyn Caldwell, Linda Bell, Colin Anderson and Darrell Jenkins. So I would also recommend that you receive those late submissions. That probably covers off the process for the hearings.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Any questions for Rhiannon at this point, councillors? Any questions of the process? Just with that 10 minutes, and they'll get the buzz at 5 and another one at 10. If the submitter chooses to use the entire 10 minutes to speak, that's their prerogative. It does, however, take away the opportunity for us to ask questions. They'll be reminded of that if they go long. Councillor Pottinger.
Will the Chair be tolerating statements dressed up as questions?
Depends on how you want to term tolerate. Very clever ones. Not really. Making a statement and going, "Do you agree?"
Yeah.
is not a question. So again, save the statements for when we get to actually debating at the end of this.
Agreed.
And please don't take offence if I just remind you. The other thing I'll be reminding everybody of is to make sure that they're speaking into their microphones for those people who are on Zoom. There was the motion. We need a motion to receive the late submissions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Moved Councillor Soper, seconded Councillor Abbott. Put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Chair, I think you also just need to receive all the submissions.
Thank you. Moved Councillor Abbott
Second that.
and seconded Councillor Lewis. So that's all the other ones. In fact, no, we've received the late ones. Now they're all being received. Put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We have 10 minutes. We don't have Mr. McLean here, chance, do we? We do. Do you mind coming up early? Yeah. Excellent. Pop on up to the table. Yep, absolutely. And if you make sure that when you're speaking to the microphone. You've got 10 minutes. We'll give you a bell at 5 and another one at 10. If you want to use the entire 10 minutes, that does narrow the time for councillors to ask questions. Councillors have had a chance to read through your submission. So really, it's over to you now. Thank you very much for your submission and for coming along this morning.
Cool, thank you. Is that working all right? There we go. Oh, thank you for allowing me to speak, and just thanks for your service to the city, because I do travel the country a lot, and it's always love coming back to Invercargill with the wide roads and the green spaces and the fresh air as well, which is good, and definitely a city with heart. Also notice the LTP is very conservative with debt, which is smart and appreciated, and also the inner city upgrade is fantastic as well. It was once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's been taken, which is great. I just got two messages today. First one is to support developers to allow subdivision development around green spaces and make it a great place to raise a family. And the second one is to not waste money redoing the museum. The first point is, I feel the council needs to support developers to develop subdivisions. Invercargill has some great green spaces, and as I understand, the largest amount per capita in the Southern Hemisphere. And so it's time to make sure Invercargill can continue to grow and enjoy these green spaces. Subdivisions are filling up, and I think we just need to have an open mindset to support developers to develop land around these green spaces. An example being is I just live down the centre town, so around this area, so this could have jumped out at me, but there's in Bainfield Road, there's Paddington Arms, and there's some land zone rural that isn't really productive as rural land, and it's not been enjoyed by the public. Whereas it could be developed into a subdivision and have hundreds of families enjoy that area to golf, hit a golf ball, the rugby park to kick the ball around, feed the ducks at Donovan Park, or enjoy the soon to be upgraded Anderson House, all within walking distance. There's likely other examples around town as well, but that was just one I want to point up, and I'd just support particularly three of those six guiding principles in the LTP, which is the city to inhabit and enjoy, and restore a healthy connection with the environment, so you get to enjoy those green spaces, and move for prosperity and health. So definitely believe in easy access to nice places to walk and bike and exercise. So just in summary, is I guess to have an open mindset to support the developers in developing subdivisions around those green spaces to make Invercargill a great place to inhabit and enjoy. Second point is wanted to make was just, I don't believe it's a responsible concept to spend that much money doing up a museum. I fully support the concept of a museum. It's a great place for children and adults to spend family time, and also to an attraction for visitors to the city. However, I see $53 million to update an old asset that is already been updated and redone, improved 3 times, and we're at this stage again. It's hard to upgrade and update an old building. You're always constrained by the existing structure and space and design, and with all renovations you end up destroying perfectly good workable assets in the process of renovation, which you spend money taking that down. So I reckon the best way to go is a new build, but I reckon there's a smarter way to do it. I don't have the answers. I read through that art gallery, South Museum and Art Gallery report, and it was very well thought out, and it puts out the new build at 75 million. I'd just encourage the councillors to look at ways to decrease the cost, to bring it down to a more sort of acceptable level. With the building, I guess there's 3 common ways you can decrease cost. You can build less, so smaller footprint. You can downgrade your specifications. Or 3, have a sort of a smarter design and bring some innovation into it. I reckon definitely the smarter design and innovation is the way to go. I reckon looking at a building that's probably a lot simpler structure, but with some innovation that gives us its own identity, would make a very good council asset, and also a very good place for the ratepayers and public to go to. Like I said, I don't really have detail exactly around it. However, I think it's worth looking into further. It's a bit of a poor illustration, but if you're looking at upgrading your own house, you can renovate or look to do a new build. When you're renovating, you're sort of constrained within your section you're on and the design of your house and your budget. When you go to sort of design a new build, you've probably got a bit of an idea of your dream home you're going to build, and you start drawing it up and you start getting costs, and it's always a lot more than you think. So I just reckon possibly that could be with the museum, with the new build. There's always lots of great ideas and lots of things we want to add to it to make it a awesome place, but I reckon adding the constraint of a more responsible budget and giving it back to the architects to come up with a design that is within a more responsible budget is the way to go. And just keep within those 6 guiding principles as well. I reckon could be looked at. So I guess in summary, I do support the idea of a museum. However, would prefer a new build and with a smarter budget to work to. So that's all I had, and thanks for listening, and trust you will get the wisdom and the answers in fulfilling the long-term plan.
Thank you, Mr. McLean, for your submission. It's open for questions. Councillor Pottinger and then Councillor Amundsen.
Thank you for that. My questions are regarding your very sensible comments around the museum. 2 things. The pyramid, is that important to either retain the concept if we did build new? And the other question is location. If you were building new, would you take the time to think, is this the right place?
I did think about the location. I reckon the current location is the best location.
Yeah.
Go to another location, there's always a lot more unseen cost, and a lot more time can be added because of resource consents, etc. Pyramid, I'm not too fussed either way, but yeah.
No, thanks for that.
But I do think it's probably good to have some identity, or it's not just a plain building, but yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Amundsen.
That was my question.
Thank you. When you're talking about support for developers around green spaces, what sort of support do you think council should consider?
Probably more just, I don't want to sound wrong, but open mindset to, so that, for instance, that area is zoned rural, and in the council plan, it's to the, word's gone free, but the overarching city plan is to protect rural spaces.
Yep.
So I reckon, however, that rural space isn't useful as a rural space exactly, and it's not been enjoyed as a green space. So just because it was zoned rural, changing it to be able to be built into residential doesn't mean we're exactly destroying rural space, my book. But I'm not thinking of financial assistance, but just making the process.
Just around the concept.
Yep. And just to make clear, I don't have any plans as a developer or friends as a developer or hidden agenda there. Yeah.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much. Mr. McLean, thank you for your presentation. Interesting. Downsizing the museum and making it more efficient, or whatever, I can't remember the exact words. What would we do with all the extra displays which are contained within the building? Would we need an extra building to contain all those, do you think, at extra cost?
I wasn't so much, so I didn't make clear what I was saying, but I wasn't so much thinking of downsizing it, but having a, whenever you put if you put a budget around something and you've got to work to it, or just brings out innovation. So whether it's different building types or materials being used or design, yeah. Because 50 million at 5,000 square metres is $10,000 a square metre, roughly, which I think's it's a good amount for a commercial public space. But yeah, I'm not.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis, just a reminder that you tend to turn your head when you're talking to somebody. Yeah. Just take your microphone with you. That'd be awesome. Mr. McLean, thank you very much for your submission. It's considered. Thank you also for answering the questions that we've had for you this morning. Thanks.
No, thank you all for your time and effort you put into it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Gordon, you've arrived in just the nick of time. If you don't mind going up a couple of minutes early.
Yes, that's fine, Darren. Thank you.
There's a microphone there. If you can just make sure that you're pointing the head at it, that would be useful. Councillors have had a chance to read the submission. Just a reminder, there's 10 minutes for you to speak to it. We'll give you a bell at 5, and if you try and make sure there's some time left for councillors to ask questions, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Thanks, Gordon. It's yours.
I'm sure I won't take 10 minutes. So my name's Gordon Crombie, and I'm president of the Waihopai Association Football Club. So Waihopai is an incorporated society, and our purpose is to provide footballing opportunities, either as a player, an administrator, coach, referee, volunteer, parent, etc. We're based at Surrey Park, and our club rooms are in the grandstand. Currently we have over 100 playing members, senior men's and women's, and junior boys and girls. Those membership numbers don't include Special Olympians, who we have a footballing program with, and students at New River Primary, who we also have a footballing program with that's about to get underway. We request that the ICC delays any decision regarding the future plans for the grandstand until such time as further information is able to be supplied to the users of the facility and the council. This is due to the lack of the specific details contained in the Surrey Park redevelopment business case, which does not allow Waihopai AFC and other users to make an informed choice as to which of the options is preferable. In requesting that any decision be delayed, Waihopai AFC also requests that the current budgeted amount of 1.5 million under option 1 is ring-fenced to ensure that this is available in the future for whatever redevelopment is undertaken. Waihopai believes that further consultation amongst user groups of Surrey Park Grandstand and the City Council is required to develop an understanding of what is required in both the short and the long term. Using information and recommendations contained in the ICC Surrey Park Redevelopment Business Case, the OTM Planning Group Surrey Park Future Report, and the Southland Regional Spaces and Places Strategy. Waihopai is mindful of the fact that a request for the delaying of any decision pushes out the time frame for any redevelopment, but we believe that by doing so, all parties will be able to develop a solution that best meets the needs of our community longer term. So a little bit of history too about Waihopai. Waihopai is currently based, the club rooms, as I said, in the grandstand, and we have fields inside the athletics track, and we also have fields where the softball redevelopment has taken place, but we are about to move from there over to back behind Stadium Southland and beside Ascot Community School. Waihopai used to be based behind the stadium in the fields behind Stadium Southland. Our club rooms were demolished to make way for the velodrome, and following that we moved to where we are now. So now we're facing that option of maybe having to move again, and obviously moving over to where the softball development is wouldn't be preferable, because then we'd actually be further away from our future grounds. So that's our case. Thank you for the opportunity. Any questions? Well,
Yep.
sorry, Darren.
That's right. Thanks, Gordon. The delay that you're seeking, how long, have you a suggestion how long the council would need to delay for?
Well, I suppose that's undetermined yet until we are able to have a look at the Southland Spaces and Places strategy, talk with the other user groups. So obviously Athletics Southland and the two athletics clubs, primary school and secondary school sports. I think there's something like 14 schools in Invercargill with roles over 300. So when they are having athletics days, a grandstand needs to be able to accommodate those 300 students plus parents, teachers, support staff from the school and their families. So there's a lot of work to be done around the actual amount of usage that the grandstand itself receives, and other groups that use it besides athletics and football as well. Other groups do use it when there's something on at Stadium Southland, for example, and like basketball tournaments, and they use our club rooms and changing rooms because there's an overflow from the stadium. So I think there's quite a bit of work to be done, but I think there's an exciting opportunity as well around working with the two athletics clubs and football club on a shared facility.
So the additional information that you're looking for is more around the feedback from those other user groups?
Yes, yeah, and looking at recommendations from the Spaces and Places strategy.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around the location of that grandstand. Now that we have the big stadium build, it gets personally I see a bottleneck right in that corner of your massive trucks trying to get round the back. Do you see and then on the sports days you see these massive crowds of kids and everything trying to get in there. Do you see the actual current location as a bit of a problem? I mean, it's north facing, but...
Yes, no, I think it's facing the right way,
Yeah.
but I think there is opportunities for the grandstand to be moved over more towards Ascot Community School, and possibilities for a road, for example, to come through from Tay Street to go around where the softball car park currently is, and that would allow trucks to be able to enter and exit from Tay Street. Obviously that would require work with their athletics clubs as well. If the grandstand was to move over, there's one athletics club right fairly close to the existing grandstand, and the other athletics club is a bit further around. So I think a smaller grandstand, but obviously depends what a basic grandstand means as well. we believe that it requires not only a roof but sides to it as well, and changing facilities and club rooms underneath. Whether that is able to incorporate athletics club rooms as well, I mean, that's those further discussions that have to be had with athletics.
No, thanks. Yeah, appreciate that.
Thank you. Further questions, councillors? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, Gordon. So just to clear and just that I've been involved with the Waihopai for decades and decades, and just building on what my colleague said about the access, it is a problem even in the current situation, isn't it? So on soccer days, even though there's not a lot of people in the grandstand, the access to that facility is difficult, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think earlier this year, when right at the start of the season, I think there was obviously junior softball was on. We talked with athletics to make sure we're not holding things on the same day, because that would just be impossible. But I think there may have been a couple of things on at Stadium Southend as well, and I parked over in the existing softball car park, knowing that I wouldn't be able to get anywhere near the football.
So two more quick questions. Just building on what you suggested about the access way down the from Tay Street down the east side of the stadium, which is going into where Queen's Park currently is and going further right down to the stadium that you occupy. If there was a road there, and if there were car parks behind the stadium, which is where Queen's Park has its current ground and Waihopai used to have its ground, would that be a better facility for you if you subsequently had the fields where the softball currently is? If you can understand all of that.
Yeah, we are going to get those fields. So
Yep.
currently we've been talking with the council, and one of our training fields is going where they've removed the diamonds,
Yep.
And where the old softball club room with Queen's Park club room is, that will be demolished, and a playing field will be laid down there. And also there's an existing playing field behind Stadium South and running parallel with Tay Street.
Sure.
That tends to get a bit boggy, so we'd
Yep.
probably prefer the other two. But I think there still is room to have that road from Tay Street through that existing car park up besides the side of the. Basically, there is already part of a road there up
Yep.
behind the stadium, and I mean there's some storage containers there as well, and there's still room for those storage containers with the road. And I'm not so sure if there'd be room for car parking. There may be. We'd have to see the layout of the playing, how the playing field's laid out once that old club rooms had been removed.
Sure. But the car parks could be on the right behind the velodrome now, which is just currently, like you say, a very boggy soccer ground, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Last question for you, and I'll be really quick on this. You asked for a delay. Our long-term plan is reviewed every 3 years. Is that too long, or would you like the delay to be shorter or longer than that?
I think, to get some certainty, obviously some older club members are a bit concerned about what's going to be happening, and probably from an athletics point of view too, they want a bit of certainty around bidding for hosting rights. They've got the Colgate Games next season, or the next season. So probably, earlier than within the next 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, thanks for the submission, Gordon, and thanks for turning up to speak to it this morning and answering the questions.
Thank you, Councillor Ludlow, and thank you everybody for the opportunity.
Mark Young, are you present? Welcome along. Thanks for your submission. Time's yours.
Thank you, councillors, Councillor Ludlow, your worship, and the fellow councillors. My name's Mark Young. I'm a long-term city resident. I think we moved here when I was 3, so almost lifelong. I first want to explain I've got a brain injury, so if my submission is a bit iffy, it's because what I think in my brain quite often doesn't go down into my hands. So it might be a bit all over the place and everything like that, but typical brain injury, I have a lot of anxiety. I'm an isolationist, So for me to be here is a big thing. Now, especially given what's happened in the last year and a half worldwide, to me, this plan is where you, as a council, decide whether you're going to be transformational or you're going to keep going the way we've gone over the last 5, 6, 7 decades, where nothing really happens. And the thing for me is these decisions and being transformational is from the top down, not the bottom up, because people like me can complain and complain and complain and nothing gets done. It's you who make the decisions. So you've got to decide, are you going to be transformational or are you just going to keep Invercargill exactly the same as it is? Now, my submission specifically to do with the CBD and the development around the mall, and whilst having a play area in the CBD would be great, to me what is more an urgent need is a suitable area for large gatherings, stages, really activities, outdoor activities which draw the people back into the CBD. Now, both this master plan and the 2011 master plan stated Wagner Place does not work effectively, and now we have the ideal opportunity to close S Street off completely and make a pedestrian part of the mall. Getting rid of the cars and developing the retail shops on the north side of S Street so that they actually become part of the mall. And that's done just by allowing full pedestrian access to the whole street. This means events can be held on S Street, market stalls, buskers, increased seating over the whole street. Far more people will come to S Street to have lunch, and therefore all the retail shops will have a far better option of good foot traffic. With over 500 extra car parks, the 20 or 30 in S Street become irrelevant simply because within about 2 minutes walking from S Street, there'll be 2 car parking buildings, 2 council parks in East and Don Street, plus all the metered parking in the CBD, plus the new car park. Now, I got figures from the council, that's about 2,100 car parks within the CBD. And saving 30 car parks when you can close off S Street, to me, makes far more sense. For too long, the emphasis has been on what retailers want, and especially when it comes to parking in S Street. Cars do not buy products, people do. And to include the north side of S Street and will increase their foot traffic dramatically. Isthmus Group developed the City Mall in Christchurch, and I'm sure they heard exactly the same complaints from Hallensteins and Ballantines and all those that were affected, that they must have parking outside their shops to survive. Yet they thrived without the cars, and in the end, the City Mall now goes all the way to the Avon. Now, they didn't close that off for some funny reason. Obviously, the City Mall works. And to me, converting our S Street into a pedestrian-friendly place, what far preferable to people sitting in their lunchrooms, to come to somewhere where they can sit. There are no cars. It's pedestrian-friendly. For too long, we have almost every 5 years heard the call about what to do with S Street. For almost 5 decades now, we've had report after report generated at massive cost, and nothing really has been done. We've gone from putting a roof over to make it a putting a roof over it, to making it a one-way by closing off right-turning traffic into S Street from D Street, and now it seems we want to turn right-turning reinstated. You were going back to what we used to have. That's not progress. The council possibly spent a few $100,000 renewing the centre strip when we got rid of the right turning and putting in the plinths, and now the best you can come up with is demolish the plinths and bring in the right turning into S Street. This is not future-proofing. This is stepping back decades to what we used to do. For some reason, councils over the decades have been fixated on cars, parking, and narrowing the widest streets in New Zealand. The days of the car are almost gone, of the combustion engine. 20% of all cars built in the world last year were electric, and that's increasing exponentially every year. We now have major manufacturers who's Volvo, Ford, Jaguar and Land Rover are now saying by 2030 they will only build electric cars. Even hybrids are gone. Now, when you've got big manufacturers like that coming out with statements like that, other manufacturers are only going to follow. So the day of the car is almost gone. And while most main cities are increasing their public transport, we have decreased ours to such an extent where only a tiny percent of the population uses it. So if in 25 years most of the cars are gone, all the parking buildings, metered parking will become redundant. Now is a time when we're developing the whole block to make a stand for the people and not cars. People buy the products that keep the retail sector alive, not cars. Your job is not to look 10 years in the future, but 30 or 40, giving this part of S Street back to the people, which will be good future proofing. That benefits not the few, but the many. Now, there was a report about cutting Tay Street from 2 lanes per side to 1. Why this obsession with narrowing our nice wide streets that are the envy of most cities in New Zealand? It is a narrow-minded view that has been very poorly thought out. At the moment, in excess of 300 heavy trucks, and I'm talking 40 to 60 tonne trucks, are coming, milk tankers, logging trucks, fertiliser trucks and trait trucks rumble through our CBD, with most turning left at Clyde Street to proceed to Ararua and Bluff. If you're even contemplating narrowing Tay Street, then a mandatory heavy traffic bypass needs to be in place first. Heavy traffic bypasses have been on the council's radar for years, yet nothing has been done about it. Why? What other cities allow these trucks in their CBD? The Crescent was converted from 2 lanes to 1, and look at what it's like now. Anyone from travelling from Leven Street quite often finds traffic back round to the Railway Hotel. And to get to the corner of Tay Street and D Street can be a nightmare simply because 1 lane services all directions. Now, if it was done to slow down traffic, well, you succeeded, because now you've got, at all times of the day, traffic backed up. It's just ridiculous. I mean, if ensuring traffic flow was the idea behind the change, let the Crescent be your guide. It's a big fail. Keep our wide streets, because if you're really concerned with safety, then reduce the speed in the CBD and not the flow. I think I speak for many who are sick and tired of the council spending hundreds of $1,000s over and over again and really doing nothing but generating income for the companies who do the reports. Your Master Plan 2011 has exactly the same concerns about Wagner Place, and yet 10 years later on, nothing's been done. It's still a lonely wee place, barely being used. Stop generating reports and actually do something, because I, for one, am sick of decades of the reports with little or no results. The CBD is for the people and not cars, and if you make real changes to how the CBD functions and how it is used, the people will come. And I, for one, hope that in the next few years, council will actually do what the people want and not just what the retailers and those with financial connections want. Maybe even now we have such an area, someone may decide that S Street is such a great place, perhaps a roof could go over it and fulfil the report of decades ago. That's basically it.
Thank you, Mr. Young, and thank you for your disclosure. I've got room for 1 question. Councillor Kett.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Well done. Congratulations. If we decided to have no vehicles in S Street, how would the retailers get their goods in?
Same as they do in the city mall, where all deliveries are by vans and they're allowed in at certain times of the day. So I think city malls 7 till 9 a.m. and 4:30 to 5:30, something like that.
And if the invalids wanted to shop there, how would they get in?
Look, if you cannot fit at both ends of S Street, disabled parking in the part that's been blocked off, then there's something wrong. We should be able to get 3 or 4 disabled parks at both ends. Surely. I mean, how many disabled parks is the mall supposed to have? Because they must have a set requirement of disabled parks. You know, if we have to get rid of 3 or 4 normal car parks to put in disabled car parks, then that's what we've got to do. You know, I had a discussion with one of the, when I presented this in November, and this person came up to me and said his customers have to park outside his shop. And I said, if his shop relies on his customers parking outside, then perhaps he shouldn't be in business. And his argument was, do you know who I am? And I said, I know exactly who you are. Getting a park in S Street is like, you've probably got as much chance of getting it first time round as you've got of winning Powerball. Second time round, it might be winning Lotto. But most people go round and round and round and then give up because it's a waste of time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Young, and thank you for taking the time to not only make a submission but to come along today.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate it. Mr. Knight, welcome along.
Good morning, councillors and Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to talk on the submission on behalf of Athletics Southland. I'm the chairman of Athletics Southland. I have been for 7 years, and I've overseen quite a bit of work done on the track and things like that. So it's a very important part of my community. So our submission, Athletics Southland requests that the Invercargill City Council to delay the decision regarding the demolition and rebuild of the grandstand at Surrey Park, Invercargill, because of the lack of specific detail, creating uncertainty, leaving us unable to make an informed decision about options given. Athletics Southland is an incorporated society with a running track facility situated at Surrey Park. We also have storage room under the current grandstand. Athletics Southland's role is as an RSO and oversee the running of the athletics in Southland on behalf of the national body, Athletics New Zealand. We acknowledge that the demolition work and rebuild needs undertaking as the current grandstand is deemed unsafe. We ask that the current funding allocation be ring-fenced while this process is undertaken, so it is available for whatever development is decided is in the best interest of all parties. As part of the group of Surrey Park users, Athletics Southland considers it necessary to have time to investigate the options that meet our functional requirements for the present and the long term ahead of us. The proposal to have a 300-seat grandstand for us is a significant decrease. It's about a third of the size of the current grandstand. Many of you would have had children down at the park when we've had athletic sports days on, and the grandstand is chocker, not only with children but with grandparents, parents, siblings and that sort of thing. Now, earlier this year when we had the primary school sports, it was a grey drizzly day. So where does everyone go? They head for the grandstand if it wasn't already full. So you end up with probably close to 1,000 people trying to huddle in the grandstand. Three or 4 years ago when we had the last Colgate games down here, we had rain. We ended up having to dig the long jump pit out because there was that much rain that we couldn't actually run the long jump in the West End. We had to actually dig the sand over to try and get it to dry. People, once again, the grandstand's chock-a-block. We've now lost the back facility that people used to set up tents on because softball have built their building over the mound. So next year when we have the Colgate Games, we've got restricted venues for tents to be put up. We see this as an ideal opportunity to actually collaborate with the council and the athletics clubs and Waihopai football and potential other users, for instance, Academy Southland, to actually build a purpose-built facility there that actually meets more than one person's needs. It's going to take time to work through that proposal, but I believe working with the council is the ideal opportunity to actually come up with something that actually works for the benefit of all parties and for the benefit of Surrey Park, not just now, but for the next 30 years. You know, as an organisation, we have an investment. Well, it cost us 660,000 plus just last year just to replace the track. So for us to keep on redoing that, you know, we want some certainty as to our viability of being there. You know, the next time it needs to be done, it'll be a top-up layer, which is somewhere in the vicinity of about $400,000. And that will be in about 10 years' time. Hopefully I won't be the one doing it, but I'll probably still be around, hopefully. So yeah, we do have significant investment down there. While we own the track, we don't actually own any buildings down there. So it's an interesting situation where the athletics clubs own their buildings, we own the track. So it does need a collaborative approach to come up with an ideal option. We, December last year, had the opportunity to invest in some new photo finish gear because our current photo finish gear that we hire from one of the members in the club is outdated. We got the opportunity from a US supplier that was struggling with sales to get $40,000 US worth of equipment for $40,000 New Zealand. So we saved $18,000 on the currency conversion. So we need to have somewhere that we can permanently mount it. But the St Paul's Club Rooms doesn't cover the finish line. So with the grandstand being a replacement option, there's an option there that I think we need to investigate where we actually bring the grandstand closer to St Paul's, or we look at a fully purpose-built facility. Obviously, each club has its own individual needs and concerns, but the time needs to be taken now to investigate the options, come up with a plan and how much and where the money going to come from, so that we can actually move forward.
Thanks, Chris. As you'll be aware, Waihopai AFC submitted earlier and made a similar request for a delay.
Yep.
Just around the size of covered grandstands at other venues around the South Island, roughly how many people do they accommodate?
Christchurch is about 300. That is an open-ended grandstand and it faces southwest, which if you've been at the athletics club, athletics track on a day there when the weather is crap, it's actually the worst place in Christchurch. They could have built that track, but because the weather comes from all directions around the Port Hills, and it is a very cold hole when the weather is terrible. Basically, that was built because that's what the money had. Athletics New Zealand have written a letter of support to you guys, stating that 300 would actually inhibit our ability to hold national level events. A grandstand of only 300. So, you know, ideally they're talking 600 seat grandstand.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Councillor Crackett.
Thank you, Councillor Ludlow. I don't know if you don't have the mic. I'll steal one of these. My question is around, I understand that there's been a few community meetings where those clubs likely affected by the grandstand got together to have a bit of a corridor about what the possibilities might be. Was there anything resolved in that if a plan was delayed and like a business case was stated, it became a much grander project, would there be any commitment to fundraising part of that, not too dissimilar to what the softball club in Queen's Park have done?
Well, obviously, yeah. And we've only had one meeting, and that was to discuss whether or not we were putting a submission in as a group of organisations. Yeah. Because, as you say, you know, the business case study and some people were affected more by it than others. So, of course, there's a little concern over a loss of identity for clubs and things like that when they go into one building. So that's all stuff that has to be worked out. If we know that the decision is going to be delayed, we can actually then get together and say, well, okay, this is what do we want? Working with the council to say, well, okay, here's an idea, let's investigate it, let's work out what the business case is for it, and then have the discussions with funders. I've already had talks with the ILT and Community Trust over the grandstand, because what's the first thing they ask you when you go in for a meeting for something else? Oh, what's happening with the grandstand? So I've already had some informal discussions with them over that. So yeah, the ball is rolling, but it's a matter of if the council's prepared to actually delay decision for 12 months or so that all that can be investigated. It may be that it's not feasible to do anything other than what's been proposed, but now's the opportunity to actually look at the opportunity and work with all the parties instead of each individual working by themselves and then in 12 months, in 2 years' time going, oh, I wish we'd gone and worked together and come up with something that was better.
Sure. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you for your submission on behalf of Athletics Southland and for taking the time to come along and speak to it today. We appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Dr. Lipsky. Welcome back. Just a reminder, you've got 10 minutes for your submission. We'll ring a bell at 5 minutes, and if you can try and leave a bit of time for councillors to ask questions at the end. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Dear councillors, dear mayor, thank you for this opportunity. I'm extremely excited to suggest two major aspects for the health and well-being or the recreational precinct in Bluff. Although there has been one little page in the Great Bluff Tourism Master Plan, I think it has been not done very professionally, and we have not considered the effects that we can actually do with such an area. If you can see this in front of you, hopefully, or on your screens, you look at the top, the benefits of, I'm suggesting basically a health and well-being center at the former or still available but not really used squash courts next to the rugby club, or which is part of the rugby club. I believe that they're not used at all, and they're beautiful space that could be used for a space to actually support the local community and the residents for everything that we know about Te Whare Tapawha and Te Wheke, which are well-being concepts that are very exclusive to New Zealand. Yet mostly we just put up posters in our companies or in our buildings about that. We barely do something. Although we know that exercise and strength training and all types of fitness are a huge benefit across every single age group, They're not only for preventing cardiovascular diseases, but also specifically something that we learned, hopefully after 2020, is mental illnesses. And exercise can prevent massively any type of depression disorders, as well as benefit any progress into dementia, which are on the rise due to inactivity, also due to the fact that we're not really approaching sports and recreation the right way, which has been highlighted by the Futures and Foresights group in various reports and papers. For example, Developing Alternate Futures by Sport New Zealand, where it has been highlighted we need a more centralized, a more singularity approach. Thus, as you can see in the infographic graphic, I'm suggesting to work with all the groups in Bluff and also to the benefit of the companies, if you can see in the infographic under number 4, funding and sustainability, the companies that the workers in Bluff are working, where they would have a massive benefit actually to their bottom line, which has been shown across the world for oil rigs, for coal mines, which is very similar to labor-heavy work like on the port, like in the dairy company, Open Country, as well as in Rakiora for all the salmon fishing and similar work. Yet, I was not able to get any positive response from these companies, which is, to be honest, a bit shocking. Thus, I'm asking you to consider such a project because there's nothing really for the people of Bluff that has been actually pointed out, even in the master plan, which I find very surprising, that tourism has been considered first, although we've seen in 2020 how it works if you have like a town like Tianau or everywhere across the world, hundreds of thousands of tourism towns that have been locally focused on tourism rather than the local residents. And that's the first part, to make this the heart of the recreational precinct. The second part that I'm suggesting is, because I know that there's been submissions or at least discussions around the swimming pool, some of the mountain biking that we're presenting during these days as well, to actually provide more activities and availability of sports and recreation to the Bluff residents, is to have a big commitment to this, to have an actual long-term plan, have professionals from the health, sports, exercise, well-being work on this and make this area around the rugby club, the swimming club, this revamped squash courts, this recreational center in Bluff, really, where we have a hub for the mountain biking, where people can come and park for the mountain biking. When there is people who don't know where to mountain bike because we don't have that many tracks yet, can have information. Some other reports like identifying the drivers and implications of change, which clearly show by Sport New Zealand that we have to get away from this thinking of isolated sports clubs that have very low participations and decreasing participations, especially sports that are very complicated to teach, and go more towards working on haora, on well-being, on making singularity sports clubs where there is more on offer than just rugby or just cycling, where we actually give the people the opportunity to pick and choose together. And I think this will be an amazing case study actually for all of New Zealand to lead, like Sport New Zealand has suggested, with a modern approach right here in Bluff. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lipsky. The first two costings that you've got for your equipment cost in first year of operation at 62 minimum and 137 optimum.
Yes.
Which organisations do you see that funding coming from?
I think there should be a community-based fund coming from the council.
Just solely from council?
No council. That comes to the question who wants to invest in that, because people might see just a return on investment, but the return on investment is not an investment return, it's a return on well-being. So I would love that the local companies to support that. I have high doubt, because I know how much they support the local rugby club. That's a joke. So it's just the only way I can put it. And I doubt they are interested, because I have contacted them and tried to make these suggestions, which are not my opinion. They're data-based, they're evidence-based. It works across the world. We see this across. So definitely yes, but if that doesn't work, I see community funding, but the council funding. There is Coronet Union co-op-based recreational centers across the whole world. Queenstown itself runs the recreational centers themselves, for example. We don't have to go very far. So I don't see why the council is considering investing, what was it, another 8 million into the swimming pool here, another 16 million in the rugby stands. I would be unwilling to actually look at the larger Bluff precinct. That is confusing to me.
Thank you. Councillors? Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. with Southport,
Yes.
have you tried going the step higher and submitting to the regional council, who are 50% shareholders?
No.
Is that something?
I was not informed by that. I never heard of
Yeah,
it
they
before.
are
It's
50% shareholders.
the regional councils.
Yeah,
who-
Environment Southland.
Environment South, and they're responsible. Okay.
They are 50% shareholders.
I have doubts based on the current conversations I had, but yeah, it's good to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? If not, thank you for the
Thank you, Ron.
presentation that you've put together, Dr. Lipsky, and for coming along this morning.
Cheers. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson, thank you for your submission and for travelling down to speak to it. We appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, and good morning, Mayor and councillors, and thank you for the opportunity. Yes, just listening to some of that's most interesting, and I'd just like to comment that it is certainly nice to have a lot of things like closed streets and people sitting out there and narrowing up Tay Street, but I think why, as one person said, why would you narrow a good street when it's doing the job at the moment? And a lot of care needs to be done in shutting streets. New Brighton and Christchurch closed its streets off years ago, and it killed the thing. And Rangiora cut its down to one lane, and now it's back to 2 lanes with parking. The thing about it is that New Zealand is, and the provincial towns, our provincial towns, are not large European cities where you find that there's a population that's travelling on public transport and lives in town and is easily able to get around through underground trains and all sorts of things. Here, Invercargill is, like a lot of other provincial towns, reliant on people coming here by car from outer districts, and we want to really bring them in from the outer districts because they're the ones that help support the retail and other things that happen in Invercargill. And I just think that before people rush into some of these things, they need to really try and establish whether it is going to be a good thing too. You know, I'm also concerned about Don Street with removing the umbrella, which was donated by a lot of people, by the bricks you can see there, and taking away more car parks again. It's a similar sort of situation. The Invercargill Council has done well over the years to keep its debt at a low level, which is commendable. Unfortunately, I can see in the future that it's got some major costs coming ahead, and I think they need to be careful because I know it's very nice now with interest rates the way they are at present, but I've been through the 20% type interest rates, and I tell you what, once they start going up, if they go up and they hit you, it can be a very painful experience. The rates increases too, you know, it's all very well whacking them on, but a lot of people in business particularly, they're faced with wage increases, compliance costs, all these other things, and it just compounds. So if wage increases are also at a 5% a year and it's compounding, it soon mounts up to a lot of extra money. And I do think that the business sector and the farming sector need to be considered. I know there are more voters in residential areas, but the business areas and things, you know, you don't want to kill them off because, and same with farming, it has its issues as well that it's got to combat at the moment. I would also point out that I think the council, as I mentioned in my submission, you need to be careful when they've got a chance to save some money, why don't they? And in the case of demolishing that building, it's just left a gap in the streetscape now, which doesn't really do anything for a town. The museum, I think, in my view, it should have been reassessed to see what was the problem. If it was nothing too major, get it sorted and keep it open, rather than the cost of temporarily shifting it and disrupting things, and then take your time and look at the long-term view and see what you're going to do. But to me, it was just a hasty decision. Anderson's Park, I believe, is a lovely old building, and needs to be preserved and could be a great venue for weddings and other such functions, and I think it needs to have the money spent on it. And Rugby Park, yes, I think that's another thing that should be probably hopefully utilised for other things other than rugby as well, because if you've got the venues around, and Invercargill's been very fortunate over the years with the licensing trust contributing a lot to a lot of the venues like the Velodrome and other places, which have been a great addition to sporting activities around Invercargill. And probably at the moment they're a bit cash strapped with their development, but they will no doubt in time be able to assist with some of these other things as well. The difficulty I see coming for the council is that with the CBD development, there's a tremendous cost there, and I think that until the income flow is sufficient to cover the cost, somebody's going to have to pay for it, and I can foresee quite a drain on the rates coming ahead for that, and I think that should be borne in mind. I think that's probably all I'd like to say at the moment, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Councillors, open to you for questions. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, good morning. You lightly touched on the museum and said it shouldn't have been closed, and so I'll just park that up at this stage. I guess council has 3 or 4 options to consider going forward, whether we strengthen just to a minimum level, whether we strengthen to a higher level, whether we do further work to future-proof it, or whether we have a new build. I just wondered what your consideration would be around some of those options.
Well, I thought the strengthening to a minimum level and keeping it operative and available as a museum, which would be the best thing. And then over time, and when they can see what other major commitments they've got, because if you can save a bit of money for a while, then you can probably use the benefits of that to do something worthwhile. And we don't, like even some of the streets here, like Esk Street was done up a few years ago, and then we're ripping it to bits again. Why isn't enough thought put into some of these things to do them once and do them right, and so that they've got a long-term benefit? Otherwise, you spend a lot of time just ripping up stuff you spent a lot of money on just not long ago.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions? If not, thank you for your submission, Mr. Thompson, and for coming along this morning.
Thank you.
I don't think Mr. McPherson is here as yet, is he? Not yet. We'll just take a brief adjournment until he arrives. Chance to stretch your legs.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Yes.
Were you there looking, checking the door to see if someone's...
Yeah, we do. Yeah, the unwanted submitters we keep out.
They're just incessantly dinging at the door. That's beautiful.
You feeling good?
Marcus just wants to let them in.
Yeah, yeah, and I was probably just meet it from I'm just conscious of time.
High Street, Plumber Street, Cashel Street. Oh no, just the traffic lights there. I often go down there and there's still cars coming down there. I have to talk that up.
Won't mention Street, there's a wee bit there, you can just come as we triangle there. You can drive around there, we triangle, but you've got there on.
You've got the square, I mean, you've only got one way around. Only got 2 ways around the square. And High Street and Plumber Street continues. But the
Crombie Street cuts through it.
Yeah.
You can't do anything.
But still, sort of his influence was that local car parks is sort of big. And it's a very narrow street. There's a car park in Litchfield Street. You could do it.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah.
I've got
On here, heading up the
Drive around quickly. Theatre Square at that time. About 18, 19. Wind down the window, shut up.
well,
We were shouting the word.
Yeah, that's a yeah. I don't know. Going up to the highway. Yeah, made up there.
yep.
I guess the big one.
Yes. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, we had that.
Evelyn's not a finalist. She just seemed to be someone that was independent.
So you know, there's one of them was recycling there for a while, and that was really
Like with the apartments were there right there. Community rental now isn't such a lot. Yeah. It's got every right to do everything and you can't do anything. Commercials. I was in 5 years ago. But I didn't.
Councillors, if you'd like to come back to the table.
Yeah, if you've been around.
Oh wow. Where's Councillor Lush?
How are you, Your Worship?
Good, thank you. Yes.
Been behaving? Yeah, so am I.
Put everything in perspective.
Wasn't sure it was going to be cold inside here today. Or warm. Bloody cold. Still warm on bloody pullovers.
Thank you, councillors. We will be taking a formal break after the submission. George has just got some handouts from Mr. McPherson.
Hi. Stabbing thing down there is a bit of a shock.
I think we should find out. He'll be remanded. He's been judged. He's murdered, but you'll find that he's a mental health expert. Detained and he'll be.
I'll hang back for a minute.
A lot of people around there.
Yeah.
And behind you.
Bonkers.
Yeah.
Man, he just.
Thanks.
He's 46 years old.
You think he would have sorted his life out with him?
I said, well, you got to remember, a 40-year-old, when you were 20, it was only being.
Right, councillors, I'll reconvene the hearing. Mr. McPherson, welcome along. Obviously not your first time submitting, but we appreciate the fact you've not only made a submission but come along to speak to us this morning. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Your Honour, Excellency the Mayor and councillors. My submission this morning is on the long-term plan that the limitation on residential lot sizes or lot size regulation should be abolished. Now in front of you, you have two photographs or two pictures of development which I think should still be allowed in the city. The property at 75 Alice Street is on 605 square metres, and there are 4 apartments or units there which were built back in 2010. And the other picture or photo you have is of 3 units at 43 Low Street in Invercargill, and they're on 577 square metres. Now both those developments, due to the current district plan, are not permissible, and I just wonder why. I would have thought that the council would be very keen to allow the use of unused land, and there are a great number of sections in Invercargill between 600 and 700 square metres, which now can't be subdivided for infill housing or an additional unit or townhouse at the back because of the current legislation, which permits only a 400 square metre main site and a subsidiary site of 350 square metres. So anything under 750 is not subdivisible. It means that those people, there are hundreds of them who own sections with old houses on, between say 550 and 650 or 700 square metres, cannot subdivide that site. And a lot of them are the mum and dad owners who already have a house, and they're left with perhaps an old villa that's becoming dilapidated on a site that they can't subdivide. They can demolish the house and build only one residence on that site. Now there are sufficient, I believe, checks and balances to not cause any what you'd call problems with what some people would call high density development. To me, these are not high density, they are moderate density. If you look at the picture of the 43 Low Street, you'll see there's 3 units. They meet all the requirements with manoeuvring, vehicle manoeuvring, distance between living spaces. Thanks to a very good designer, I was able to erect 3 dwellings on that site. It's only 577 square metres. And as many of you know, the modern rules are good in that you have to provide north-facing windows today and a north or west-facing outdoor area. Those are all complied with, and with the recession plan requirement, there's no worry about overshading adjoining properties. So that's generally my submission, Mr. Chairman, and I hope councillors will take that on board. A lot of people don't realise that the rules were changed back when the current district plan came into being, and for some reason the council hasn't allowed a slightly denser development. They've actually gone out to a wider space, and these units, which are at the present high quality accommodation for rental, including some with 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, very much in demand, and the city is extremely short of this type of development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McPherson. Can I ask, with the minimum density requirements in the district plan, and as a developer, would you see it's possible to get below those requirements if you're able to mitigate amenity concerns and other the light spill and turning circles, that it is possible to get below that with good design?
Well, I think I've demonstrated that with the 2 examples which were permissible in 2010 and 2013. I must be one of the luckiest people in the world to be able to do this, and I thought it was replacing extremely old dumps, you might call them, cold old houses with brand new modern buildings, which provided, of course, 7 occupations as against 2 close to the city, and there's a whole raft of advantages of having a more dense population close to the inner city.
Thank you. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Brian, Yeah, you raise a really good point. So, would you just mentioned close to the city? Okay, would you see sort of a zoning like take Windsor, take South Invercargill? Would it make sense to have this intensive housing close walking distance to those, shopping areas, or hubs? Does that, not just CBD, but you've got the Windsor is important one, South City. You've got other ones around Invercargill, or would you just have it open slather and this intensification could happen anywhere, or would you like to see it more controlled?
Well, I think personally I'd like to see it available, not restrict property owners anywhere in the city. You make a very good point. If it's close, like Windsor already has a lot of infill housing there, which were built in the 1990s and the 2000s, but can't be built now. But I can remember back in 2007 subdividing a property, and the back section was 313 square metres, and that was adequate, because you still only have to cover 40% of the land. A good point. Could be developed that these slightly high density areas. I don't call them high density at all. I call this very much moderate density housing, and having it close to the populous shopping centres is a good idea, but I'd like to see it expanded. I have no personal grudge here. I won't be buying these sections if you do approve of this. It's not a personal grudge. It's just a concern I have for the future of the city, for your long-term plan to enable more concentrated new building occurring in a lot of areas where the land is superfluous or it's gone to waste. To me, anything over 600 square metres should be able to be subdivided and infill housing built, or townhouses or whatever.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Brian, you touched on the issue of rental demand, which we know we have, which is the supply and demand of housing in the city, and it's right across Southland. So we have a real shortfall there. But the other issue I'd like to pick your brains on, I guess, is whether there is a demand for people who want to retire and downsize. So these small clusters are actually a bit smaller than maybe going to a retirement village, but as my colleague just mentioned, it could be close to Queen's Park, it could be close to shopping centres where they can walk or not be reliant on being too far out. I just wonder whether you're picking up any demand from people that might want to take a large family house, downsize into something smaller and more manageable, and release equity for their retirement, and whether that helps with the supply and demand as well.
That's a very good point. Fortunately, I was able to consult with surveyors and have these individual units in Low Street separate titled, so they can be sold for the likes of retired people. The occupation of these flats, take the Low Street ones, are only 1 and 2 people. There's not big crowds, as some people might fear, in a more moderate classification of density.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, thank you very much, Mr. McPherson, for your submission and for taking the time to come along this morning. Councillors, that brings us to our first formal break. So I will adjourn the hearing for 10 minutes. We reconvene at 20 to 11. like to take a seat, welcome along. Just before you start, a reminder to those presenters that have just arrived along, you have 10 minutes to speak. We will ring a bell at 5 minutes and another one at 10. If you'd like to leave the opportunity for councillors to ask questions if you don't use the full 10 minutes. Thanks, Hugh.
Good morning, Council and Mayor and staff. Good to be here again today. Just before I start, I'd just like to give a shout out to the team that worked on this LTP. Alex particularly as a project champion, probably one of the best pieces of documentation I've had to read from the council before. Very well presented, easy to understand. I think it's spoken to, and the numbers you've had in submissions to that, so congratulations and keep that up. Just a couple of points I wanted to make. Firstly was just picking up on the previous speaker's commentary around housing. Some of you might know we provide products into the housing market, so I get to see housing across this nation, in Auckland and Tauranga and Wellington and places like that where we're seeing significant growth. I in principle agree with Mr McPherson's suggestion of higher densification. I also, part of me disagrees. I think Invercargill is one of the few cities like Christchurch that has the ability to grow its borders easily. We have no geography restraints or topography constraints as cities like Wellington, Auckland, Tauranga do with inlets and the general lay of the land. So I think Invercargill has got an opportunity to grow significantly if council is prepared to expand the borders. We're not a big city. We've got a good roading system. If you look around the city, all corners of the city are serviced by good roadways. I understand there is restrictions on infrastructure having just recently built in the northwest, which I think should be addressed sooner rather than later. Particularly believe that the area north of Queen's Drive should be explored rapidly for housing. As many would know, stage 2 of Invercargill is now sold. Stage 3 is going to market soon. Nearly the last sections in Northwood are nearly sold, which is the last sections that are available in the northwest of the city. So I think that should be explored quickly. I think it should be done as a council and private partnership. Obviously, it's a big risk for council to do something like that, but I believe they have the land and should move on it quickly. I think the more land we can provide our residents, the more housing we build, the more jobs we'll create for our future generations. But the real point I wanted to cover off today was congratulations on the LTP overall. I think it's a really gutsy one. I think it's great to see the councils leveraging their balance sheet to transform the city. I think the Roadmap to Renewal is a brilliant title. It's not an understatement to say that the city is going through transformation. As I say, I travel a lot and see a lot of cities, and Invercargill is going to move, I think, into probably one of the best CBDs of a medium-sized city in the country. I was just in Tauranga CBD last week and I was disgusted. A city that's well known for its, the CBD of Tauranga has been destroyed by the large malls that have been built on the east and west sides of the city. So I think it's fantastic that our city is going to have a mall smack in the middle for our children and our grandchildren. So congratulations, Council, on that. My bigger point I wanted to make was really around the fact that we need to change the national narrative around our city. It hasn't been helped by the fact that our CBD has been the front door and a fairly obvious tatty one at that. That is changing, and I think it's time for us to own that. Change the narrative. If you're in business, you're selling a product, A, you've got to have the product to sell, and then B, you've got to market the heck out of it. People don't know about it until you tell them, and I think that's where we sit today, particularly going into next year. I think the council should lead a business/council partnership around marketing. We're trying to recruit high-level staff to our head office here in Invercargill, and it's a challenge, but I know if we had a collaborative effort from business along with council promoting the city as a great place to live, obviously the CBD is going to be a tangible transformation. I believe that businesses would be happily to contribute some of their marketing spend to that. I think there's an enormous community demonstrated by the involvement of HWR, which are the obvious ones, others, Paul Adams and others that are actively support Southland and are based here because they love the city, and ourselves included. So I'd like to see some movement on that and happy to discuss it with councillors now or offline. So yeah, with that, I'd just like to say thank you for taking the initiative for the city, and great work on the LTP, and I hope it moves forward quickly.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind feedback as well. Councillors, it's open for questions. Councillor Lush and then Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, thanks so much for your positivity. What do you see with when recruiting workers? What do you see as their resistance to moving down here, and is it borne out in fact?
I think if you, Marcus, as an example, someone that's proudly lives in Bluff and has obviously come from the big smoke, My twin brother lives in Auckland, and I can't understand why he does, and I can understand why you live in Bluff. I think it's a perception. I was talking to a business owner last week at a conference, and he asked me where I was based, and he said, "Are you based in Auckland, are you?" And I said, "I'm based in Invercargill, it's where head office is." It looked like he'd spotted a lemon. People simply don't understand what's here. It's a perception that's been driven by in part media, apologies, and look, it's one of those things we have to overcome. But I also think, given that we're starting from behind, if you might say we're the underdog, that in turn, in this current age, I believe is an upside, because we have the ability to actually change that narrative. And I think Southlanders too are also very conservative when it comes to promotion. So I think having something to talk about, and I think the rebrand the council did 3 years ago, albeit fairly hidden at the moment, it was brilliant. Like the logos and everything. I mean, it's all part of the story. I don't know if that answers your question though.
Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Hugh, are you aware that later on this afternoon we have the PPP committee meeting discussing the new national policy statement on urban development? Are you aware of that new national policy statement?
Not specifically.
No, it would be great just to have a read of the agenda for this afternoon. And yeah, I was just wondering if you did, because it touches on a lot of the comments about urban development and freeing up land.
Sure. That's on the council website, is it?
Yeah, it'll be in the
Yes,
agenda.
it is.
Yeah, for this afternoon. Yeah.
Further questions? If not, thank you again for your submission and the positive feedback, which is appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jeanette. Welcome along.
Kia ora. I can start.
Yes, you can. Sorry.
Kia ora koutou. My name's Jeanette. Firstly, I would like to say that my grandparents are from here. My grandfather was the foreman of the train station at a time when our resources were shared by everyone. I'd also like to point out the coat of arms on the wall up there that translates to for the benefit of the people. So I come with the Bluff Living Wage group, and we would like to see the long-term plan benefit all people, but especially we ask you to consider those on lower incomes. Bluff Living Wage speaks for those who often don't have a voice when it comes to the long-term plan, what is built, where it is built, and how it is built, and also who benefits from it is really important to us. We see the implications of a really high income gap in New Zealand, and we notice that it's been the largest and the fastest growing income gap in the OECD. So we're speaking to that. So that inequity is something that we actively move to close that gap, and we do that by upholding the living wage. And the living wage it's only a little bit above the minimum wage at the moment, but still it's a significant amount. That means that people can actively participate in their communities more freely. So we would like to see some governance on this issue and some leadership from our council to implement the living wage in their long-term plan and strategies, especially for the likes of any procurement contractors, people that you're employing within the organisation, and how that is contracted out. We see the benefits of this for the community is like tenfold. We'd like to also point out that there's numerous other city councils that do implement the living wage in their governance. The Dunedin City Council, for instance, and they've found that in doing so, the immediate CDB business communities have benefited from doing that. So they see the revenue just going back into community. So the living wage movement is closing the gap, and it's benefiting the economy. We're asking for you to make the living wage a priority in your long-term budget, and I think that's all I have to say for now. Does anyone have questions?
Thanks, Jeanette. The living wage, what's the gap between that and the new adult minimum wage?
So it's at the moment it's $2.10, and in September that will go up to $2.75 per hour. So it's not a significant amount, and in fact I think we calculate that there's almost about a quarter of the employees at the City Council are receiving at the minimum wage, and we see that by increasing $2.10 per hour would only be in the realms of about $200,000 per year. It's not a lot, but it does have significant benefits to the community, especially like things when what we see, people having less stress when they have more income. They more easily contribute to society. Yeah, just mental health issues, things like that, they are all impacted by lower incomes, and increasing the income has massive implications for health, for society at large. So, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. You've read the roadmap to renewal?
I have.
Yeah, right. Just I'd like your comment on Council's proposed rating change for the low residential values, and when you read the commentary, it is looking for those people on lower incomes. So I just wondered what your comment was about Council, striving to actually do something proactive there.
I think my general comment is that it's like proportionally, like this Invercargill City Council tax increases are, I think, of benefit and timely as well in comparison to other areas where the taxes have been a lot higher. Yeah, could you speak to anything with the living?
Yeah, is it right if I speak?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, what you're doing is great. However, I think the council has a responsibility to look after those employees that are on the lowest wage.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just talking about the rates for all of Invercargill.
Yeah.
All of Invercargill. No, that's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Further questions, councillors? Councillor Abbott.
Just a quick one. I missed your comment on the minimum or living wage as applicable to our workforce. What did you say with on the minimum or the living?
So yeah, we note that almost a quarter of the workforce is on the minimum wage.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Just missed that.
Thank you. Further questions? If not, you survived. Well done. Thank you very much for your submission and coming along this morning. Lindsay. Welcome along.
Thank you. Mayor Chairman and councillors, thank you for letting me have a moment. I am concerned about how the money is being spent and how it has been spent in the past, and how budgets seem to be blowing out all the time, and we now have this huge mall that we're going to have, and the council keeps asking ratepayers to pay more money, and our pockets are only so deep. So as much as I agree with the mall, and I'd love to see some great parks around the East Street and East Street closed off for bikes and that sort of thing, there are other things that may need to be considered. And I'm just not 100% sure, given the history of what has been done in the past, whether we won't end up with a huge blowout again that the ratepayers are going to have to pay. We've had the swimming pool, which in the first years was supposed to be what it is now, and I think I said we didn't really need at that time to do a world tour to find a pool. We only had to go 2 hours up the road to Moana Pool. We now have that iteration, 4 iterations later, and so I've been told there's going to be a new one. So all those things have also cost money that didn't really need to be if it had been done correctly the first time. The inner city office space that for whatever reason was built and can't be rented out is obviously another concern for budgets, and ratepayers are paying for that. Rural land, forestry, it all seems that whatever this council or the councils before have been involved in to better the city, and it's been done in many ways kind of okay. I mean, I hear backwards and forwards many times, and I come back here because now I have grandchildren here. Parking's easy to go to the shops and things like that, and obviously parking will be easier once we have this mall, although I'm sure with online shopping, I'm not sure who's going to really be buying there. You know, the Queen's Park, we could have had a nice Margaret Mayhew type park years ago. Years ago, I have said the same thing. We're in Southland. We need areas that are sheltered for our children to play in. The museum was good. We could walk around the museum at different, even with my own children, now my grandchildren, but we don't have that. And that's going to obviously cost a lot of money to be back to where it was a few years ago. We could incorporate a great science museum if we go 2 hours up the road and look at Dunedin's Science Museum and Observatory. And still look at Moana Pool, because it's still there, although I was told 20 odd years ago that it was leaking and it will be pulled down. So I think, in a way, as much as I like the city and being here because it's convenient, it's 10 minutes across town instead of like other huge cities, we still need to, you guys and your accountants and those that tell you these portfolios that obviously hemorrhage money, need to perhaps reconsider how you finance things or how the finance is going to work so that our rates aren't increasing, because our future children and grandchildren are never going to be able to afford to own a home or even pay the rates for a home. Which brings me to another point with rates, that I think it should be more fair to not just hike the rates up on people's properties who actually take care of their property, but also the properties, and more so the properties that aren't in good repair, because they're the ones that end up costing the ratepayers more money in demolitions or services or anything like that. And you know, the long grass and the shabby windows or whatever, they still use the same services. They still use the water, the sewers, toilets and all that sort of thing. But they have less rates to pay than someone who has taken care of the property or even built and added to the property to enhance it. Which brings me along to another thing, is the building and department here just seem to, I suppose, lord it over everyone with their interpretation of the building code. It is an interpretation. I'm heavily involved in that area, and I've gathered lots of information throughout the country on fees and charges and what has been charged in here that has put people off building here and living here and the commercial buildings being built here. So as much as all these people would like to see a great city and congratulate you on having this fine city, sometimes the, what's the word I'm looking for, unconscious ineptness is, or conscious ineptness actually, is strangling the city with your own red tape. I know of many designers and builders, architects that are struggling to talk with your building inspectors and get them on board with the actual interpretation of the code. And it is frustrating. There are so many people that have decided not to live in Invercargill because of those reasons. And pretty much that's it. I mean, it's a good city to move around in. Oh, and apparently narrowing the streets again. Well, we used to have centre parking before, and that was all removed because it wasn't viable. So we're going to be narrowing the streets again. Is history going to repeat? We're going to end up paying more money for stuff that will be pulled down in 10 years' time in the long-term plan. Railways, how many railway crossings have been resealed and resealed and resealed through costs that go to the ratepayer in the end? But, you know, the concrete blocks over every crossing would be perfect because they don't need any more maintenance. We've just had, you know, where the roundabout is on Bluff Road, Alice Road, that area there, it was only through lockdown that top of Alice Road there was sealed at great cost. and now it's all being ripped up again in the long-term plan. So how long is the long-term plan? And do you not feel that perhaps the ratepayers are entitled to have perhaps more say or more lenience on some of the accounts that are apparently available to council that can be directed to offset certain finances instead of waiting for the rainy day that may never come? Or maybe this is going to be the rainy day when that all's finished. But anyway, that's all I had to say.
Thanks, Lindsay. Councillors, open for questions. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Lindsay, just looking at your comments here in writing on the city centre, have you actually had a good look at the plan that that's coming up for adoption this afternoon? Have you looked at the streetscapes?
I did a wee while ago, and then I was told, oh, it's going to be changing. So I thought, oh, well, I'll just wait till it's actually going ahead.
Okay, just I noticed your comment about the height of things, you know, not being not having too high things to trip on and stuff. And I just wondered if you. So I think it'd be great to read that. So I just wondered, reading
I
this.
did ask. I was one of council. I was a building inspector because I did trip over at one of the shops on just a small bit of bitumen that had been left. Because I can't lift my foot, or maybe 2-3 mil. So it's a lot of scraping, and my foot hit a ramp that had been repaired so that people do not trip on it, and I tripped right over it. So when I was talking to the building inspector, I can't remember who it was, I asked if the mall was going to be, I suppose, wheelchair friendly, user friendly, and he said yes, it will be for wheelchairs. And I said, well, that's not enough, because wheelchairs can roll over stuff, but people that have had strokes, and I'm in a big group of people that have strokes, they can't lift their foot or their leg, so they skim, and as well, their muscles are a lot weaker than they used to be. So opening doors, you know, if the mall had sliding doors, electric doors and moving doors, instead of doors you have to push, it is absolutely, I can't describe the strength needed just to open a
No, my question, thanks for that. And my question again was just about, you obviously haven't seen the latest one, so you've confirmed that.
No, I haven't seen the latest one.
Yeah, and
but I was talking
regarding
to
those
the
points you
building
made.
inspector 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? If not, thank you, Lindsay, for your submission and for taking the time to speak to it.
Thank you all.
Public Health South. Janice and Lynn. Welcome along to this unfamiliar process to you both.
Thank you for your warm welcome, Mr. Chair. My name is Janice Burton, and with my colleague Lynn Grace, we are both health promoters in our Public Health South Invercargill office. Public Health South is the main source of expert public health advice within Southern DHB. Currently, during our COVID response, Public Health still wants to maximise our support for community wellbeing. Now that the Local Government Act incorporates again the 4 wellbeings, we see real synergies between our organisations. The Invercargill City Council has an important role in shaping our community for the well-being of our residents. Health begins where we live, learn, work and play. New Zealand research has shown that the strongest influence for people's health comes from factors outside the health sector. They include social, cultural, physical and economic environments in which people live. Public health units across the country are increasingly using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals when working with councils, particularly around well-being. In 2015, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a set of 17 goals to end prosperity, to protect the planet, and to ensure prosperity for all as part of a sustainable, holistic development agenda. Each goal has specific targets, and for those countries which have adopted them, including New Zealand, these targets are expected to be reached over 15 years so that health can be improved for all. Today, we will focus on the Centre City Master Plan and the urban play space. And in relation to this, 3 of the Sustainable Development Goals are particularly relevant. Number 3 is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Number 11 is fostering healthier cities through urban planning for cleaner air and safer and more active living. And number 17 is mobilising partners to attain the social development goals and improve health for all. Dr. Lucy Saunders is a public health specialist and transport planner who contributed to the London Transport Strategy. She developed the Healthy Street Indicators, which is an evidence-based approach for fairer, sustainable and attractive spaces which consider the health impacts of transport, public health and urban planning. The indicators are 10 key elements that are considered necessary for public spaces, streets and parks to improve people's health while making urban places socially and economically vibrant. One indicator is that people choose active transport, to walk and to cycle. Pedestrians will do that when it is easy to cross a street so that people of all ages and all abilities feel safe. Cities which prioritise cycling effectively often have similar numbers of women and men cycling. I think we have a little bit of work to do on that locally. I think we see more men than women cycling. With increased active transport, the streetscape is less noisy and the air is cleaner. Where there are things to see and do, places to stop and rest, and good shade and shelter are provided, people feel relaxed and welcome. They will be drawn to such spaces and will spend time there. We recommend that public toilets and a breastfeeding facility is included in the plan so that means it meets the needs of all ages, including young families. Creating such environments enhances the physical, mental and spiritual well-being and encourages social connection.
I'll take it from here. Thanks, Janice. I would just like to give you a little bit of context of where I fit in at public health, and my role is liquor licensing, which is a role that I deal with the licensed premises in town, and we sign off along with the police and the inspectors. It is also a health promotion role, and that role is looking at the well-being and alcohol harm reduction in our communities. So firstly, I'd like to take the opportunity to commend the Council's proactive and collaborative approach around developing and maintaining the local alcohol policy, and also the ongoing implementation of liquor ban in the Invercargill CBD. These harm reduction actions, they align with the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, and by maintaining our community's amenity and good order, it also supports the purpose and the object of the Act. ICC's alcohol harm reduction actions also align with the Sustainable Development Goal to ensure healthy lives and promote wellbeing for all at all ages. In relation to the liquor ban, we asked the council that they would consider extending this liquor banned area to encompass the South City as a high deprivation area. We asked the council provide and maintain distinguishable but tasteful signage that it's obvious to the public that they're either entering or are in a liquor ban area as well. Reducing exposure of alcohol consumption and promotion in public settings supports the amenity and good order and healthy community behaviours. In relation to the proposed inner city play space, Health recommend in their submission that any family or social space that is developed, we trust that council will consider reducing exposure to the consumption of alcohol. We ask that these spaces are not subjected to outdoor dining and seating where alcohol consumption and smoking is prominent or likely to occur. An easy example of what we don't want to see in the public space, and particularly in front of young people, is having to walk through smokers and drinkers, such as they do on the way to the library or to Auckland Place outside front of Spates Ale House. If an urban play or outdoor space is considered, we recommend council take the opportunity to explore the possibility of access to the space in an area for vendors, arts, opportunity for events such as buskers festivals, which create the vibrance in the city. Health would suggest the community space is restricted from pop-up bars, portable bars and so forth, once again lowering exposure to alcohol and supporting amenity and good order. We thank you for your attention and forward thinking into areas which support sustainable development goals in preparation for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice and Lynn, and thank you for the detail on the various points in our consultation documents that you've fed back on in your written submission. Lynn, if I can just ask around your suggestion of liquor ban area in South City, has that followed an approach from any organisations, anyone, or increase in incidents?
I'm not aware of increase of incidents, but it does. I guess it is an area that has become has been looked at with South Alive, and has become quite a wee hub. It is changing. I can't say that it's developing, but it does align. It is often the south area, their wee central hub, and it does align, I think, with the principles of the CBD, where it's a hub there as well. It's just something to consider. There are a lot of food outlets up that area, so it is a gathering point.
So if I can expand on that, then is it something that council should look at in areas, other areas where there are hubs as well? Possibly. It would be with consultation, I would imagine, with police to identify issues. Is there issues in Windsor? Is there issues in South? It would be through that consultation whether you move forward on a liquor ban in that area. Its principal purpose of a liquor ban is to reduce the harm. Thanks, Lynn. Councillors? If not, thank you very much for a very detailed submission and for the additional commentary you've provided this morning. We appreciate it. Yvonne McClellan. Good timing. Well done. Welcome along, Yvonne. If you can just make sure that you have that microphone in front of you. You've got 10 minutes. We'll give you a bell at 5. If you want to take questions from councillors, just make sure you leave a bit of room before we get to 10.
I'm not used to speaking in this kind of situation, but I thought that my submission that I made was pretty straightforward for those of you who read it. And my main objection was to spend $52 million to refurbish a building that's only going to be 67% usable, well, 60% up. So how much is it going to cost us in the years to come to bring it up to 100%? You can say 52 to give us 67. It's like with any old buildings, once you start ripping into it, what's in the contingency fund? And my idea was that you just knock it down and build us a whole brand new building that's going to last us for years and years and years to come. So has anybody got any questions to ask me on?
So thanks, Yvonne, and thanks for taking the opportunity to come along to the Otatara consultation meeting where we had a discussion as well. So, councillors, it's open for questions if you have any of Yvonne. Councillor Amundsen and then Councillor Skelt.
Thanks, Yvonne. I just wondered whether you felt strongly about whether the museum should be rebuilt where it is or whether we could look at other places to put it.
No, I've put it here that you put it in the same place. It's Queen's Park. We already own the land. You don't have to purchase any land to go anywhere else. And my other suggestion was that you incorporate the arts centre with it. It doesn't have to be in the, I mean, they can still be two separate buildings. One on one side, one on the other, but joint in the middle as a foyer that has our eye centre in it, our cafeteria in it, our offices if need be, the gift shops, and you're only using one set of one set of utilities for heating and everything else. You don't have to provide for two different places. We have the room at Queen's Park. I mean, it doesn't have to be an extravagant design. It just has to be a simple design that is going to last us for years and years to come.
Thank you. Councillor Skelt.
Well, thank you. I know Yvonne's answered my question. Thank you.
Councillor Soper, then Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yvonne's actually answered my question as well.
And Councillor Clark and then Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, Yvonne, thank you. Just one question. You made the reflection that we own the land in Queen's Park. So, given that it's been closed for about 3 years, and people have got a little bit used to not having it there, and given that you suggest that we shouldn't have to buy land, what would your view be if we had a museum in, say, Lower S Street, where we were looking to put the art gallery anyway?
I fully object to it.
Okay.
You need to put it in a place where it's accessible. Putting it in Lower S Street is not accessible for tourists. I mean, when I worked in a business, I have forever had people coming in, which way do we go to the Catlins? Nothing was sign marked to go anywhere in this town. And, you know, you need to put something. Queen's Park, everyone knows where it is. They know how to get there. It's easy for visitors to get there, even from the CBD down. And I mean, you can say where we've got our museum at the moment on the corner of Don Street and Calvin Street, I have seen the children coming there to go and visit. There's no parking for the buses. They have to drop them off down the road. And I understand that the businesses want their parking, but you can't have it both ways. You can't have people wanting to come in there and use it and excluding other people to having access.
Thank you.
Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Yvonne, right, with the current proposal, it's $52 million, and of that 52 million, 12 million is being relied on from external funders. Now, if you built new, of course, we'd be looking for external funding as well, which is smart. Do you think council would stand more chance of getting external funding with a beautiful, inspirational new museum compared to a doer-upper?
Certainly. I mean, look at our mall that we have in town. The council committed to that, and because of one things and others, we had someone pull out, which the council had to recommit extra funds. I mean, that's fine. A museum is a museum. I have lived in this town and I have been here most of my adult life, and I'm coming 62. And I've seen a lot of projects that the council have done over the years that have not measured up to, are no good now. Our swimming pool is one of them. We were building this state-of-the-art swimming pool with an Olympic pool. You know, we could have all these events there. The failure there was they didn't provide enough seating for spectators. We have a beautiful velodrome that we can't really hold national events because, once again, we do not have enough seating. The only thing we've actually done, built for purpose, is our stadium, which we can at least hold international games in.
Right, so just getting back to that original question
Yeah.
was funding, trying to attract external funders for a doer-upper or something brand new that was a showcase for 50 years.
I'd say you'd more likely get more external funding for something that is brand new than a fixer-upper that would require more input later on.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, Yvonne, you've survived it all. Well done. Your first submission, and you're still here. Thank you very much for taking the time and for coming
Thank you very
along.
much for listening.
Anna, welcome along.
Boy, that's a good start, isn't it?
Now that you have our attention.
Yeah. If I could have all of your attention, please. No. So I am new to Southland, but I just thought I'd give you a bit of my background and kind of a bit of context. So I hold a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science and Physical Geography. I worked for a year and a half on a major construction project in Auckland, the City Rail Link project, which you've all probably heard of, mostly in the environmental sort of carbon accounting side of that infrastructure project. I've done some freelance work for the Spirit of Adventure on an environmental assessment for their works. I also hold a Skipper's Restricted Limits, which I gained on Stewart Island. And what brought me to Southland was I definitely recognised that there was some cool stuff going on here, and some forward thinking, and friendly people, and a really beautiful, rugged environment. So yeah, most of the requests or kind of comments in my submission relate to kind of environmental sort of focused things, but also the way that the environment is changing at the moment is a really important consideration for long-term planning. Basically, we know that the things that have already happened in terms of the climate change or the carbon dioxide we've put into the atmosphere already, the full effects won't be felt for at least another 100 years. So that's definitely a long-term planning sort of thing. And it's not just so much about planning to do the right thing. It's also that if the climate changes, you have to really prudently plan for that. And I'm sure you're all very well aware of that. So I'm sure you're all very well aware of the National Directive on Decarbonisation at the moment, with the first budget going into place for New Zealand in 2022 with the aim to get to completely net zero emissions by 2050 for the country. Yeah, therefore just any planning or any infrastructure project that is implemented should definitely, in my view, be aligned and account for those initiatives so that you don't run into roadblocks in the future where you're like, oh no, we didn't take that into account, or, you know, we haven't looked at the carbon footprint of this, and that then becomes kind of a regulatory requirement later on. But also because it is the sensible and just thing to do for everyone else who lives in our region and in our world, I suppose. So yeah, the physical effects being felt as a result of climate change, man-made climate change, are forcing us to be more savvy and efficient with the resources. I've just been speaking recently with someone about electricity prices, and because lake levels are low, electricity prices might be going up or be uncertain. And it's kind of nature's own way of forcing us to put in solar panels, because if the electricity price goes up because we've caused the climate to change so that it doesn't rain, you can't generate power, it's kind of like it's forcing you to be more efficient with the resources you have. And also, of course, if you're more efficient, it's more cost effective as well. So yeah, as that becomes more uncertain and poses significantly greater costs, I think that when you're in the planning stages, just very prudent to make sure that anything you design is designed to run with maximum efficiency and kind of like minimum operating costs. That was a big thing with the Downer Iska project, or the City Rail Link project in Auckland, in that they had kind of milestones and things they had to achieve for the design phase of the project and the operational phase. So they had certain targets to meet in terms of water use, electricity use, and all that sort of thing, which is not just a good thing for the environment, it's good for the wallet as well. It's also forcing us to become more resilient. I came to, which I as a definition to me, is the ability of a system to recover after a shock, which is strongly often explained by the modularity of a system, which means the big system has lots of little components which can function independently and be self-sufficient. So when I came along to the evening on the long-term plan a little while ago, there was some discussion about water tanks, which is like a perfect example of that, where if you have a shock to the system and maybe the main infrastructure lines are damaged, you're actually a lot better able to respond to that shock if you're all got little resilient pockets of resources or supplies of resources. So yeah, I made a recommendation that I think it'd be great to see more sort of planning in that vein to look at incorporating maybe into building consents that people have more modular, resilient sort of water supplies, as well as I know you're investigating a secondary water supply which is of course very prudent, like as you say with pollution and drought, to have alternative options, but maybe we should be looking at alternative options that are not just similar to the one we already have, but maybe more modular, which will actually improve resilience. And I just, basically like to say as an end that it's a global problem that can only be solved by many small actions. So every action, Invercargill, Southland's actions, even though on the world scale seems small, it's definitely still very important. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. A question around green design and green engineering. Generally, the bottom line is a little higher. What's your position on the long-term economic effect, even though the build cost is higher?
I definitely also kind of throughout my submission mentioned that in terms of financial planning, I believe in higher upfront costs for a lower operating cost, or which will in turn have savings over the long run. So yeah, that's definitely my position on that.
Thanks, Anna. Councillors? Councillor Pottinger.
Hi, Anna. Just regarding, is council doing enough with respect to carbon sequestration? I mean, would it make a difference if we had empty spaces instead of being grass, that it was actually trees, which have a far higher sequestration?
I definitely think there's potential to look at that. I think any person who has the privilege of owning land has an opportunity to sequester carbon, but it's that's one part of the solution, but it's often referred to as a band-aid on the solution.
Yeah. Well, say getting away from the financial side.
Yeah.
The actual proactive side of,
Yes, as in terms it's a band-aid to the solution, because you're still actually putting the things out there that are causing you to need to plant trees. So they're kind of just like the number one approach is to use less and use renewable resources in the first place that don't create the emissions, then you don't have to plant the trees. But the trees are good too, and they're probably at the moment, I think, one of our best technologies to kind of mitigate our effects at the moment.
Your Worship.
Yes, Anna. I had a campaign of putting water tanks on every house because of the Christchurch situation there. And seemed to be quite a bit of resistance here. Why do you think there was?
I can't imagine. I think I spoke about it when I was here at the other evening, and in terms of, I come from one of the other far-flung regional provinces of New Zealand, Northland, where it's very dry, a lot drier than Southland, and my father is actually in the business of making water tanks. And so up there it seems very normal that every house just has one or two, and that's just the way things are. So I can't imagine why. But I suppose, again, extra cost, I'm not sure.
Councillor Amundsen.
Thanks for your presentation, Anna, and for all of the great ideas that are in your submission. From a councillor point of view, the whole climate change thing can be quite overwhelming to be thinking about it in terms of, a whole city and what do we need to do and where do we start. So I wondered if you had any suggestions about what we as councillors could ask for or initiate with the staff as kind of a first step to get on the journey of really addressing issues around climate change and acknowledging them properly.
That's a big question. So mostly by that, do you mean tackling the emissions that Invercargill as a city produces?
Yes,
Or-
that,
or
and
the
I
city
guess
council
the
produces?
city council in terms of mitigation and adaptation and all of those things.
Yeah. I think kind of the basic formula for any kind of emissions reduction or a lot of other things as well is to first of all, take quite a strategic approach and be like, where do the majority of them come from that we have control over, and what's the most cost effective way that we can make the biggest change, which is often called your marginal abatement analysis. But predominantly the biggest things we can really affect are fossil fuels and transport is a huge one. I think anything that Invercargill City Council can do on cycling and encouraging cycling in Invercargill would be awesome. It's a very flat city. I bike myself. I think it's awesome. And it's a huge win-win-win for the environment, for people's health, less cars on the road. And also, I think in terms of the wastewater treatment plant that you have, you're currently burning off the methane, but there could be the potential to utilise all of our waste streams for energy. I think we should waste less.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions? If not, thanks, Anna, for a very thoughtful submission and for taking the time to come along this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Kite. Timely arrival, sir. Welcome along.
Thank you, Worship and Councillors. Do I take it as read, the submission?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, I'm here to speak on behalf of the New River Estuary Forum regarding the submission to Council on looking at putting in the long-term plan the old Invercargill City refuse dump, and looking what can be done there to mitigate the issues that are there from historically that have been left there. So the dump was sealed in 2004, but it actually wasn't sealed. It was a heavy rubble seal around that, and the dump continues to leach into the estuary. The New River Estuary Forum is a group that was started in 2018 of concerned people, communities around, recreational users, and other interested parties looking at what can be done with the New River Estuary. I myself, I lead Thriving Southland, which is involved with the catchment groups throughout Southland. So looking from a rural perspective, there's a focus on managing sediment and nutrient input into the estuary. But when you look internally, probably the rubbish, the old landfill is probably an area that needs, continues to leach into the estuary. And from a recreational viewpoint and from a Invercargill viewpoint, if you actually go and stand there and look over the estuary, that's where people used to collect kai. They used to, and they still do enjoy the boardwalk down there, and they enjoy looking out on the estuary. But the estuary obviously needs a lot of improvement. One of our first meetings, we met with Porirua, a member of the Porirua Council, who looked at their estuary, and their view was they'd all turned their backs on the estuary. So everything within Porirua faced away because they didn't want it became the refuse space for the city, and that's obviously what in the past happened in Invercargill. The view of the New River Estuary Forum is to we actually need to turn and look towards the estuary as an amenity. It is we're talking about an historical issue with the dump itself, but if we can keep kicking the can down the road, it'll never get addressed. So we feel if you could look towards putting that within your plan. You're looking at the Stead Street stock banks. We're looking at and sealing along there. It would be quite, I suppose, prudent to actually look at the old refuse dump and actually look at and say, you know, look at the possibilities around sealing that for a future, looking into the future, and and when you look at, I suppose, coming into Invercargill, into the airport, heading down to Bluff, the Tarawa Trail, that goes straight through that area. The New University Forum's been talking with stakeholders around what could be done, but it's really an area which should be beautified and not left to be leaching. And I say it's probably something that needs to we need to make a start. As far as the forum go, we say don't point the blame at anybody. It's about working together as a community to make a difference and to make a change. And we understand there might be, you know, the funding required may be considerable, but actually looking at different avenues and having the support of the community would be a way that we suggest that we move forward. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Councillors, it's open for questions. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Richard, I've had some involvement with Liz Craig over this. I just wanted to clear that. So I'd like your view on a couple of issues. Have you done any costings of what it would cost to sort of duplicate the stop bank work around?
No, we haven't. We're not a funded organisation either, so that's
Sure.
a real challenge for ourselves.
Okay. And over and above putting a bank in which might stop some of the leaching, what are your views on tree planting as well? Because that can help mitigate as well.
And that's part of the discussion if we've been looking at beautification and maybe linking that into the work that's gone on in Bluff right the way through to the airport. But the issue is if that leaching continues and at some point needs to be remediated, so you can beautify the place, but if remediation kind of needs to happen before you need to know where that's going to happen and at what point before you can actually carry on and beautify. So there's a lot of interest in planting that area and making it an area, as I say, that we can actually look out on our estuary from. But the investigations probably need to be done to see what remediation could be done.
And just one quick question. When you talk about the damages from the leaching, are you talking about all the way around the old dump, or is it more predominant into the lagoon?
We've predominantly focused on the dump, but that runs out into the estuary. You can see the leachate there when you walk down on a wet day, and you can see it coming out and flood. And I do know we've got the same issues at Stead Street along those stock banks. But so that's
Thank you,
Councillor Lush, then Councillor Kett.
Yeah, thanks for that. Is it possible to remove all the stuff, or that's the stuff that's dumped? It's the
it's as 20, 30 years of refuse there, so I think to remove it would be a challenge. But I suppose that's one of the areas of investigation that needs to be looked at. But
but with water rising and everything, the situation will become worse with storms and stuff releasing stuff into the estuary.
And it certainly will with sea level rise if it isn't sealed. But it's probably an issue that a lot of councils have, and a lot of councils are looking to deal with. And I would suggest being first cab off the rank might be a good position to be when you're looking at change.
To remove it.
To remediate it in whatever way. Yes.
Councillor Kett.
Thank you, Richard. Is there evidence of the fish being poisoned in the area?
There's certainly leachate coming out, and my understanding of the consent through this council is it's an old consent, so it doesn't look at the toxins that maybe it needs to look at within that area. But I know there has been work done, and obviously Environment South and have that work, but I'm not sure that it's been published.
Yeah, it might be interesting to know that there's a lot of whitebaiters, fishermen that on the Waihopai River. So that means the whitebait have to go through that area you're speaking of, and up to Waihopai to Thompson's Bush, and there's probably 10, 15, 20 whitebaiters.
This is leading to a question, isn't it, Councillor?
Yeah, so there must be, if they were poisonous, the people wouldn't be eating them. So if the fish can get through it now, and the problem doesn't escalate, it may be quite safe, would it?
I think it's down to, I'm not an ecologist, but the toxins that accumulate within the fish within the estuary is a problem. And as I say, I haven't got the science in front of me, and
Thank you.
Councillor Pottinger, then Councillor Soper.
Thank you, Chair. Richard, with the leachate, is it driven by rain coming down through the structure and then helping take stuff out, or is it just leaching without rain?
There's a tidal flow into
It
that
comes in.
area, so and because it's not sealed, it's constantly
Goes in, sucks it out.
Yeah,
So that's my
yeah.
next question. So it's at that height of the tide coming in.
I haven't got an engineer's report around.
No, the reason, I mean, you mentioned with that Stead Street bank, the rise is 1 centimetre a year.
Yeah.
So, which is significant. And so, if it is, my question was the cause of the leachate.
With the dump, it's more the tide rising, and it's a sort of a
No, thanks for that. No, that makes it worse. Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Soper, then Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Richard. I just wanted to check. I presume you're making a similar submission to Environment Southland.
We have been talking with Environment Southland around the need for remediation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Arnold.
You will have been aware of people actually fishing for trout, sea trout in that area.
Yeah.
Do you have any feedback on the quality or state of those fish? Because they're catching them and eating them, I believe.
That is probably an issue. Is the heavy metals and toxins. We don't have the actual report in front of us. There's been work done, but we don't believe it's been published as yet. It's always a challenge. But if to put our hands up and say we're all surprised in 3 years' time when somebody comes out with a report about that, I don't think that's probably good enough. Yeah.
No further questions? Mr. Kite, thank you very much for your submission and for coming along this morning. We appreciate it. Councillors, that brings us to our next break, actually, a little early. There are a couple of light amendments to this afternoon, one person shifting off to tomorrow and another submitter withdrawing. So we will actually reconvene at 1:20. If you can make sure you're ready to go at 1:20, that would be appreciated. We are adjourned.
That's one. What? So I might go to Queenstown for lunch.
You got your helicopter ready?
Yeah, the Westpac.